With the release of God of War Ragnarok being right around our assholes, I thought it'd be a great idea to pick apart one of my all-time favorite characters and find out just what the hell is Kratos' true power. I mean, aside from the obvious. But before we do, let me tell you what we are not going to do. We absolutely don't care about mythological accuracy or lore. We are not going to predict what will happen in God of War Ragnarok. This is not that kind of a channel. Basically, we don't really care about any objective information. I'm just gonna leave you with one thing that I believe to be Kratos' true, raging, ass-penetrating, jaw-to-balls-dropping power. Again, aside from the obvious. First off, Kratos is technically a demigod, his father being Zeus, the god of gods, and his mother, Callisto, the human. He does eventually become a full god, but that's for later. Kratos has a rather interesting character arc in my opinion, with the last God of War game truly amplifying all the other games in the series and, well, basically reviving the whole shebang. In the earlier games, with him going on a rampage to kill every single god who is kind of mean to him/his people, he shows some form of empathy or care, though it's still not exactly because he's a UN representative.
I'm a fucking god of war.
See, it is absolutely inconceivable to say that he is able to beat every single god, human, creature, and whatever the fuck this thing is thrown at him just relying on his powers. His journey in God of War 2 and 3 alone solidify this point. There is something else that sets him apart, something a little bit more subtle. Anyway, to make God of War fans all around the globe mad, we need to dig a little deeper into Kratos' powers to answer, once and for all, just what the f*** Okay, let's get this out of the way. Kratos is stupidly strong. Yeah, it's not exactly a big secret. This alone gives you a pretty good idea of his immeasurable strength. Being the son of Zeus certainly helps, but he is also constantly been in battle. Battles which he wins, by the way, with insulting ease almost every single time. He's also almost completely invulnerable to all sorts of things like magic and stuff. And he's superhuman in almost every single way. Oh, did I mention he's also immortal? Yeah. I mean, not entirely, but still, this dude will literally witness the heat death of the universe before he dies. And there are subtle things as well, such as his wisdom and mental power, as well as mastering just about every single means of destruction known and unknown to Godkind. But see, these are the things that pretty much every single player knows at this point. But his journey can tell us a little bit more about the not-so-obvious powers he has, the powers/abilities which I argue are the fundamental factor why he always wins. It's extremely boring and repetitive to just create an unmatched OP character who shreds everything in their way. I mean, after all, he defeated Zeus, the god of gods. And if we're strictly talking about raw powers and abilities, this would be a go fuck yourself type impossibility. But as we saw in their final battle, Kratos was able to break free and ultimately kill Zeus with the power of hope. I kid you not. No, I'm not making this shit up, I swear. I mean, look, I know it sounds completely ridiculous, but it just wouldn't exactly work in any other way if you think about it. They're fucking gods for Zeus' sake. Remember how I mentioned his rather interesting character arc? Well, this is it. With every passing step, the one thing that ultimately makes him prevail against his most powerful enemies is righteousness. Because while he isn't by any means a saint, at the end when the chips are down and the choice is between him and some other character, you root for him because he's the closest fucked up representative of good, and it puts him above all his enemies. This is of course close to some of the messages in mythology that advocate virtue, justice, and, well, generally being a good boy. In stories where there aren't any clear good guys and bad gals, every single character lands somewhere on the morality scale with no absolute answers. And in the case of our beloved Kratos, he continuously gets closer and closer to being virtuous. If we trace his steps back, we begin to see just how vivid this pattern is. He started out as a bloodthirsty Spartan general who vowed to make his enemies take a dirt nap. And then a bunch of other things happened until what I consider to be his first impossible enemy, the Furies. With Kratos being extremely traumatized because he killed his family while under the influence of Ares, the Furies tried their best to use this pain and suffering against him. And it wasn't until he accepted the gruesome shit he had done that he was finally able to break free and defeat them. Though still by no means he was cool with his traumatizing act, it was still a massive step forward, with true acceptance only happening when he encountered yet another impossible enemy, Persephone. And surprise, surprise, he wins again, because he was somewhat morally right, and this somehow amplified his strength and godly powers. And then a bunch of other things happen until he meets and ends yet another impossible enemy, the god of war himself, Ares, who once again tries to use Kratos' awful memories to create a psychological void, where he literally has to fight phantom versions of himself to save his family. Of course, Ares doesn't allow it and kills his family in front of him once again, but Kratos uses his raging vengeance, despite being almost completely broken inside, to kill him.
I was trying to make you a great warrior. You succeeded.
Kratos had done the impossible. A mortal defeating a god.
Yet another righteous victory, a path to redemption. Kratos trying to erase his past and hoping for his sins to be forgiven, though impossible, was nevertheless the true source of his power, and again the righteousness he gained along the way, now becoming the full god of war. And of course, the other Olympian gods still f***ed with him by giving him nightmares like every single night, which just deepened his hatred for gods. And he just kind of felt like, you know? As the story unfolds, he meets his long-lost brother, Deimos, who blames Kratos for not being there when he needed him. Aww. But they all hug it out as the death itself, Thanatos. I'm just gonna call him Thanos. Yet another impossible enemy who is only defeated when Kratos loses his brother in this battle, the last member of his family. It's incredibly easy to root for Kratos in this instance, not because he's the main character, but because his pain and suffering just don't seem to end. He uses his rage and abilities ultimately in the pursuit of something better, and knows that gods are almost always in his way. So that is why he has to continue to slay. Get it? It's a Beyonce reference. I'm lame. It's also extremely important to note that he by no means is a good guy. It's that right now he is on somewhat of a right path, while the methods he chooses are questionable to say the least. Kratos is enigmatic. You don't exactly know why he does the things he does, but you can to various degrees understand him. Kratos never completely loses his godly powers, even after Zeus drains and almost kills him. This shows his sheer will for justice and virtue, which could actually transcend beyond any godlike powers, or at least aid him tremendously throughout his journey, with the right amount of assistance, of course, along the way. Yeah, you know, the classic good versus evil type shit. He even managed to manipulate time and destiny itself in his battle with
Lachesis
without having his full godly powers. Now that's just wow. Anyway, he just straight up murders the entire Olympian gods gang and ventures off into the unknown. Having more and more time to contemplate his actions, and who he is as a person with no immediate threat in his way, Kratos tries his best to live a normal life, even desperately trying to get rid of his blades because they remind him so much of what he had done. But as the story continues, he begins to chill out a little bit. He finds a wife, they have sex, and the magic pelican brings the baby. They name him Atreus, and then the wife dies. And a person like Kratos is famous. He is too famous, in fact. Thus, a normal, troubleless life is just an impossibility. Not the kind of impossibility that he can do something about, though. However, this time around, Kratos isn't really worried about himself as much as he is about his son, Atreus. He doesn't want his son to become just another maniac who happens to be a god, so he tries his absolute best to show him good boy manners. Their relationship is rather complicated, and Kratos, while making some mistakes along the way, ultimately manages to succeed. Or does he? See, the one thing that I believe a lot of people are missing is the point that Kratos isn't just trying to help his son. He is also trying to fix or undo his past mistakes, which is not really possible. And this, I believe, is his final step towards redeeming himself, which is paradoxically not doing that at all. The last step of his righteous journey will be to accept that no matter what he does and how hard he tries, it is ultimately up to Atreus himself to choose his own path. He can never go against his own nature of being the god of war, but he can be different, and so can his son if he chooses to. To defeat his strongest enemies yet, he has to defeat himself. Being righteous doesn't immediately grant you any powers, but it helps you to amplify and use them better. And one certainly could argue that Kratos, after all those years, is now even stronger than before because of discipline, self-reflection, and a newly found mental fortitude. He can channel his energy and use his godly powers much better than any god can. This is what puts him above all the others. While most of his powers in the past came from rage, resentment, and vengeance, now it's become hope, acceptance, and the willingness to do and become better. Kratos saw an opportunity to redeem himself, which put him on the right path, but the last step will be to just let Atreus go when the time is right. No matter how painful or obvious that path may be, and no matter how much he likes to erase his own, he is the slayer, not of gods, but of every immorality they represent. Which is why he is not just more powerful, driven, and unbreakable, but also all the godly elements combined and used for good. He is an anti-god god, an anti-idolatry idol. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how Kratos is able to defeat his enemies. Yeah, getting teared up over here. Thank you so much for sticking till the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Make sure to subscribe and tell me what you think down in the comments. I forgot how to talk. Just. I'm not pointing at my dick, by the way. I'm just